In terms of participation in the webinar, all attendees are muted at this time. As we noted in our email, we will be prioritizing questions that were submitted in advance of the webinar, but if time allows, we will allow for verbal clarifying questions to be addressed at the end of the webinar. And so to ask a question during the webinar, you'll see a button on the bottom of the screen that you can click to raise your hand. At that point, a host can unmute you in the order questions are asked, and you can proceed to ask your question. We ask that when asking a question, you share your name and organization, and then please mute yourself and lower your hand afterwards. If you're on the phone access only, you can dial *3 to raise your hand, and you'll be unmuted in that process. All right. So I'll kick things over to Paul Douglas, who will be leading our webinar today.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for making yourself available for our office hours. So as Emily noted, we asked for questions to be submitted. We've got probably a handful of questions, a couple from PG&E, a couple from the Coalition of California Utility Employees. I think we'll get through them fairly quickly. And I do have one question. Is the Coalition of California Utility Employees actually on the webinar right now?
Looks like we have Darian Johnston on the line from Q.
Cool, great. All right, then I will start going through the questions. Emily, you want to start clicking through the questions then? Thanks. So Q is asking us, can we define the problem that FIP is trying to address? And I would say that if you go to slide 10, it sort of summarizes what the purpose of FIP is. And having said that, it is to facilitate the identification of medium and long-term electrical infrastructure needs, which we define as distribution, substation, and transmission. We are not focusing on behind-the-meter infrastructure for chargers. And the reason why we're focusing on freight is that it has significant localized impacts on the infrastructure. And the expectation is that if FIP identifies proactively the electrical infrastructure needed, we will reduce the risk of long lead time infrastructure delaying the energization of charging stations. And I would point you to slides 20 to 22 in the webinar deck. It outlines in more detail some of the problems that FIP is trying to address. So, Darian, did I address your question?
Myself, yes. Oh, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. It says I'm still muted. Yes, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Great, then we'll just keep moving along. Next question there, Emily. So we got a question from PG&E. Question 2, are there any additional market regulatory, operational, or infrastructure issues that need to be considered for the freight planning problem statement? And PG&E is right, this is a broad question because we are not freight planning experts, and we're opening up the sort of the conversation. We're not freight planning experts, and so the problem statement that we've outlined in the staff proposal actually is used to shape the staff proposal. And if the problem statement is too narrow or focusing on the wrong thing, then we would need to change the staff proposal. So we're asking parties here, are we missing anything? And if we are, then how would that change the problem statement and how we would design and implement the FIP framework? So PG&E, did I answer your question?
I'm not seeing a question from PG&E, but
It looks like Howard stuck his hand up.
Take one from Howard. Great.
Does your proposal include off-road vehicles including vessels, forklifts, cargo handling equipment in general?
Not at the moment, but as we said during the webinar, that anything that requires long lead time infrastructure is potentially in scope for this framework. So as I noted when responding to Q's question, we're focusing on freight because that's sort of an immediate and a very localized problem. I would also say other sort of vehicle categories that you noted would probably also require long lead time infrastructure, but we have to start somewhere. So we're encouraging people, if they think there are other long lead time infrastructure, other vehicle classes that need long lead time infrastructure, to identify them in their comments and help us think through what would we need to change in our proposal to also bring those in.
Okay, but so I just want to make sure I'm clear. So not even forklifts in warehouses?
No, at the moment it is short haul, long haul freight. And as I said, to the extent that they need long lead time infrastructure, then that could be integrated into this framework. And maybe even the framework would need to change. It's not called the freight infrastructure planning anymore. It would be expanded. Jessica?
Question two, I may have missed it, but are these slides going to be shared?
They are. But you have, all they are is just a summary of the questions that we got, and so we can share those.
Oh, not the responses. Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Well, they'll be recorded. Yep.
Yeah, Jessica, we are sharing a recording of this webinar.
Cool. Looks like we have another question.
I am with Cal Advocates at the CPUC. My question is just around the word problem statement. Can you help me better understand what you are meaning when you say problem statement?
Is the problem that we're trying to solve. I'm sorry if that was, that's literally how I define that.
Sure, but like, does that have to relate to the reforms itself, or is that really just like the whole purpose of the FIP in general?
It is the problems that we have identified that we think need something like FIP to solve.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep. All right. I think Emily will move on to the next question. All right. So, it says PUC said in its May 2023 webinar that the FIP is meant to accelerate planning for unknown future long-range transmission projects at the substation level and above. What point in the project development timeline does a project become sufficiently known that it would fall out of scope of FIP? So I would actually ask Q a clarifying question. If you could explain to me what you're thinking when you say it falls outside the scope of FIP.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, so thanks. I think we're trying to just get a clearer sense of, if it's a known project, something that we know that needs to be done is how it was explained in the webinar, then that would not be something that FIP would address. But I think when I thought about this, known, what means it's known? And when it comes to project development, you might have a project that's identified to be built or built out, and then something happens and it falls through. And correct me if I'm misunderstanding the process, but I think if that's helpful clarification, that's what we're trying to figure out.
All right. Well, I'll take a stab at it. You let me know if what I'm saying is not doesn't make sense.
Okay.
So the way I think about it is known infrastructure challenges tend to be either problems associated with energization of an existing project, which is they've approached utility and they want to request service and there's some delay in that. Another one is there's a delay in the infrastructure upstream of that project. And for some reason, whether it's lack of qualified staff or lack of funds, or there's a shortage of transformers, as for an example, there's a delay. So, but we know of the project, and so it's not really a planning problem. And so, as we noted at the beginning of the present webinar and the staff proposal, is that projects sort of beyond the 5-year time horizon are ones that you could probably plan for and react in time to some extent. The further you go out, the more time we have to react to it. So we generally don't use the word, at the moment, staff don't use the word known for projects that actually would go through FIP. If they're known, meaning they're actually already an established project and for some reason they can't energize or there's upstream delays, they're known. So I would say not to use the word known in the context of FIP, and that for projects that are identified, say an upgrade that's needed in year 10 or year 20, what happens is FIP would identify sort of charging zones where we think freight needs to charge. We would do that in consultation with our sister agencies and stakeholders. There would be some vetting and adoption of that forecast. Then it's used to inform distribution planning. Utilities would use it to identify where there's infrastructure needed, and then they would submit that in a general rate case for cost recovery. So it's always sort of in scope of FIP because you'd want to keep track of that sort of baseline of projects. And if the projects change or they are materially delayed, do they impact other projects that have been identified? So I don't think of it necessarily as falling out of scope. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's helpful to clarify.
Cool. All right. And then with regards to your second question here, that we are asking questions about energization and distribution level issues, and that I think you're saying that they're out of scope. Is that what you're saying here?
Yeah, when I had seen in the original webinar was a fairly clear statement about, using the terms known and unknown projects
Yep.
in scope and out of scope and moving away from lower level distribution issues.
Right.
And I think we're just trying to get a sense of, should we be commenting on those lower level issues connected to the FIP? And if so, in what way, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does. So because the reason why I'm asking is some of the questions you've identified are not related to energization or distribution level sort of planning issues. They're sort of even more like system planning. So I'll just focus on the energization and distribution level issues. So based on what I just said about known projects, anything sort of like under 5 years, we're probably not going to really be able to plan and authorize and build in time. So I would say that energization, if we agree that's what energization means, the stuff under 5 years, then I think that's outside of scope of FIP. And I don't think any of the questions that you noted deal with energization, but we can go through them and you can tell me if we got that wrong. And then with regards to distribution level issues, so if you're talking about distribution below the substation, I would agree with you that at this moment in time, that's outside the scope of FIP. If you're saying anything to do with distribution substation, excuse me, anything to do with the distribution system, including substations, should be out of scope, then I would disagree with you because the bulk of the medium and heavy duty freight is going to interconnect at the distribution system level. So Darian, do you have a response to that? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
All right, and if you want, we can go through the questions that you identified at the end if we have time. I think we will, because we're going to go through these pretty quickly. And I'm happy to explain to you what the thought process was behind the question. and maybe that will provide you some more context, because a lot of them get to sort of co-optimization of distribution versus transmission, or distribution and system level planning, or affordability, almost from a cross-sectoral perspective. So they go beyond energization and just sort of lower level distribution planning issues. So, but we can go through those if you have interest, and there's time at the end. All right, Emily, if you could move on to the next question. All right, so question here is, should long-range transmission planning consider both the needs of both IOUs and POUs? And I would say the short answer is yes. I think the ISO does plan for IOU and POU loads. Given that the PUC doesn't regulate the POUs, I don't have a lot of experience to what extent that occurs, but I have heard the ISO talk about that. Some POUs actually have their own balancing authority. So the ISO would not plan for them, but there are some that don't. And so I think the ISO would plan for it, but I could be wrong. I'm not an expert on POUs. In addition to transmission planning, I also think load forecasting and distribution planning should consider sort of the interaction between IOUs and POUs. And that's because, we regulate the IOUs, we don't regulate the POUs, but the electrification of corridor segments that would go through, POU territories and utility territories need to be electrified sort of in a coordinated manner. You can't just electrify one segment, then a segment below that and above that is not electrified for some reason. So there needs to be some coordination across POU and IOU planning for electrification of corridors. That's a question that we asked in the staff proposal. What would be the process for doing that? So that would be some helpful guidance that we'd like to get from parties. Darian, did I answer your question?
Yeah, that's definitely helpful. And I think if you had any suggestions about how to do that, that would be helpful for me at least.
I don't at this moment. I'm very looking forward to the July 21st comments. All right. Next question is PG&E. So you're asking here, is the FIP based on the CTC analysis? So then what is this question referring to? So what this question was saying is that based on the initial analysis that the CTC did for its SB 671 report, we're saying just take it as at face value, based on the scale of infrastructure that it would imply, what changes would need to happen to FIP, if at all, to make it to make the proposal able to do what we want it to do. Basically, does FIP break as proposed today when it's done at scale? That's the question. And we just added the CTC's analysis to the webinar because they're the first to have sort of done this work, and that's where we started. And just to give people something to react to and actually see some numbers. So that's why that is there. So also just point out to people that the utilities are doing implementation sort of assessments, basically case studies of specific parts of their territory using sort of the FIP framework. And they started with inputs from the CTC regarding corridor designations. Those case studies are not going to be publicly available for a little while. So I just want to put that out there. The other thing is that at some point we're going to have to sit down and working with CTC, the California Transportation Commission, the utilities and other stakeholders and other agencies, come up with a framework for, systematically vetting the methodology that the CTC spent a lot of time on, and see if we need to make any tweaks to those corridor designations. They've identified the high priority corridors, but they also acknowledge there are priority corridors, and so we just need to think through, how many corridors do we actually need to study, and if there are limitations because there's so many corridors that need to be studied within and electrified within a certain time frame, and we can't do them simultaneously, then we would use this sort of process to figure out, like, how do we prioritize that electrification? So PG&E, did I answer your question?
I'll provide the feedback back to the team. I don't know if anyone else is on from PG&E. I will circle back with you if it's unclear still.
Yeah, I mean, the takeaway here would be we need some way to prioritize corridors. We started with the CTC's approach. We'll establish once we get the comments and see where the framework is going and the timing for it, then we'll establish some type of stakeholder process for vetting and adopting the priority corridors. And the utilities would be very involved in that, and then that would be used to inform the charger zones, and that would be used in distribution and transmission planning. So that's the concept. But you can always follow up with me, Jessica, afterwards if you want additional clarification.
Thanks. So one question along those lines. I mean, both our distribution planning and transmission planning starts with the IEPR.
Yep.
So I don't believe the CEC or the CAISO, for that matter, have presented on the framework. Are you working with them collaboratively on the back end
Yep,
on
we're
this?
working with them very closely. Actually, we have meetings with them. We have a meeting with the CEC on a weekly basis. Once the proposal sort of evolved a little bit more and we have a little bit more clarity as to how this might inform transmission planning, we'll schedule more regular meetings with the ISO. But we've met with the ISO senior staff. They've been briefed. They understand it. I think they support the problem statement. They're just waiting for us to connect more of the dots.
Thanks, that's helpful.
Yep. All right. Next question, Emily. Let's see. So given the regulatory mechanisms that are in place, like the IEPR, that have already been updated to reflect advanced clean fleets, why is FIP necessary? So I would recommend that you reread slides 20 through 22 in the staff FIP webinar that was in May. Those slides outline sort of the accelerated infrastructure deployment, why accelerated infrastructure deployment is challenging for the current planning and forecasting processes. And I can just quickly go through some of the issues that we don't have a vetted common set of TE inputs and assumptions. So that means when the agencies are doing the planning and forecasting, they're planning for different TE futures, significant market and technology uncertainty as to how electrification is going to occur. We don't have infrastructure planning process for renewable hydrogen. It takes approximately 3 years for the various sort of agencies to do their sequence planning, and that doesn't include the time for cost recovery at the CPUC. It also states that we have a lack of a granularity for freight load forecast, that we don't have information about the location of future fleet charger locations that align with fleet business needs. CTC has started doing work on this, and we've used it to kickstart some analysis in the utility case studies, but that's an issue. We don't have a framework. Even if we knew where the optimal locations are for these charges that align with fleet business needs, we don't have a framework for then looking at the electrical infrastructure implications and how to optimize the fleet needs with electric sector needs from a reliability, affordability, resiliency, climate adaptation perspective. So those are just a few things. So Darian, did I answer your question?
Yeah, that was really helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. All right, next question. When would long-range substation and transmission projects informed by FIP begin construction? Well, I would say right now, it's a little unclear because we haven't implemented FIP. But I would also say our goal is to finalize the framework by the end of the year. And then sometime before then, we would start working with utilities to analyze the impact of the forecasted charger zones that we would develop on the distribution transmission system. And then once we have the initial assessment of the infrastructure impacts, we'd have a sense of the size and timing of the infrastructure build out and its impact on the schedule for charger zone energization. Basically, would get a sense of, is there a mismatch between the charges that are needed to support the advanced clean fleet regulation and the timing for the infrastructure that needs to be built? Are they in alignment, or is there a mismatch? And we'd have to go through that exercise to be able to answer that question. And then if the timing between the infrastructure build out and the charger energization is not in alignment, or the total build out is more than we can build simultaneously due to, like, say, utility staffing or funding limitations, then we would consult with stakeholders on how the electrification of various segments should be prioritized. And so I think the takeaway here is that we need to do a little bit more work before we can really answer that question. Darian, did I answer your question?
Yeah.
All right. Next question.
So I believe that's all we received
All
in
right.
terms of questions in advance. Oops. So at this time, we'll open up to questions more broadly. So we'll take questions in the order we see them in the queue. So just please raise your hand and we'll unmute you. You can ask your question. Just be sure to, again, just state your name and your organization. I'm sorry, we're having challenges hearing you. We may move on to the next person, but we'll come back if you're able to try again.
Hello? Are you
Hello?
able to hear me?
Got
Yeah,
you
we
now.
can hear you.
Got you now. Sorry, Howard. One moment.
Hi, my name is Susie Berlin, and I work for NCPA. And my question is, to what extent will the full development of this FIP be done through Energy Division versus do you anticipate a CPUC proceeding to implement this?
So right now, we want to move quickly. So that's why staff is doing the bulk of the work outside of a proceeding. And it's something that we've done in integrated resource planning to great success. And so our goal would be to get the informal comments, have the utilities finish their case studies, pull it all together, revise the FIP proposal, and then circulate it for comment in the fall time. At that point, I think we'll have a pretty good sense of where and when it's going to get integrated into a proceeding. And at that point, you would know if we're asking for informal comments or formal comments. But I think the expectation is that it will be integrated into a proceeding. Next question.
Should I speak?
Yeah, go for it, Howard.
Okay. My name is Howard Gollop. I represent the Port of Long Beach, which is essentially a customer of the services in question. And I think by far is the largest potential freight handling customer certainly involved in this proceeding. I have two questions. One is strategic and one is very technical. Let me start with the strategic question. First, is any of this intended to release or reduce the utilities' obligation to serve, their duty to serve?
How are you defining the duty to serve? Meaning, like safe, reliable service, or?
Let's just use section 451 of the Public Utilities Code as the definition. It's basically, it says they have to provide safe, reliable, et cetera, service for the convenience of its customers, the public. And
I would say the short answer is we're not planning to undermine that. or even address it. I think that's immutable.
I agree, and I'm delighted to hear that. Second is a very technical question. I know you told me earlier that off-road vehicles such as cargo handling equipment and vessels are not currently included in the proposal. But do you have any sense of the percentage of load that they represent compared to the load that you are considering?
I don't. And that would be probably a good question for the California Energy Commission, since they do the load forecasting.
Thank you.
Next question.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yep, go for it.
Okay, hi. I'm Ellie from Cal Advocates, and I just had a quick question about some of the themes within your slides from the earlier webinar kind of seem to be prioritizing business operations and freight routes as opposed to like prioritizing not including any interruptions to freight businesses. And I was wondering to what extent the FIP is considering electrical infrastructure proximity in the proposal as opposed to not disturbing freight business operations.
Could you restate that question?
Yeah, just coming from the perspective of Cal Advocates and the potential impact of the ratepayers, something that's concerning in terms of building out infrastructure for charging medium duty and heavy duty vehicles is the proximity to key electrical infrastructure like substations, transformer banks, all that. And if we were to have to expand the grid in order to accommodate freight infrastructure, then that cost would be potentially bared by the ratepayer. So I'm just wondering what priority do you see the proximity of that grid or the charger infrastructure to grid infrastructure compared to the disturbances of freight business operations, and basically how are those being balanced and prioritized?
No, that's a good question. So I'll first start by saying, at the PUC, and this is, our mandate is safe, reliable service at affordable rates. So for us, that is a binding constraint. So then once, from that point, then there's a conversation around how much infrastructure is needed, by when, and how does that impact rates and reliability, resiliency, climate adaptation. And to answer that question, you need to look at the proximity of, say, a section of I-5 where there could be, large DC fast charging station for 20 or 30 long haul trucks. And where are the wires in proximity to that? What's the available capacity? And if there is insufficient capacity, then how long would it take to build that capacity? Does it align with the timing needed for that charging station that the freight industry needs to be in compliance with the regs? And then what is the cost? So the proposal here, it's identified in a couple of parts, a couple of places in the staff proposal where we are proposing that you're looking at a segment of a corridor. In that segment, there's going to be a variety of charging locations. For us, that's probably below our radar screen. So what we would do is aggregate that so you have a charging zone, and then look at the implications of that charging zone, net peak, load profile, the location relative to the existing infrastructure, and look at the cost, risk, and time of that infrastructure impact. Then you look at other zones, charging zones along that corridor and other corridors, and see in aggregate what is the impact on the electric sector. And if we identify that there are places where there's a disconnect from a timing perspective between when the charging infrastructure is available and when the charging station needs to be energized, and there's a significant amount of time needed to do the upgrade, or is a significant amount of cost. In the proposal, we categorize that on a scoring criteria like red, yellow, green. That would be a red. And then if we end up with a bunch of reds, then we need to sit down with stakeholders, sister agencies, other key decision makers, and figure out, how do we do the loading order or prioritize the electrification of these segments while maintaining reliability and affordability. So there is unfortunately, there's no one model that does this. In IRP, they have like the resolve model, it's this optimization model. We don't have that for this. This is going to be sort of a hand-built optimization exercise where you iterate between the utilities assessment of where the assessment of the impact of those charging zones on an infrastructure to the extent there's insufficient capacity or there are high costs or there are big delays, then we have to work with the stakeholders to figure out how much flexibility they have, either delay a charger, move a charger, change a charger. So it's sort of a long-winded way of saying that one of the key parts of this proposal is that optimization exit framework that doesn't exist. It's proposing a manual way of doing it, and we're asking stakeholders to comment on it. Did I answer your question? It was a little bit long-winded there.
Yes, that answered it. Thank you. I appreciate the long-winded answer. Lots of detail.
There you go. Never short of detail. That's what they say about me. All right, next question.
Pam, you should be able to ask your question now.
Looks like he's still muted.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yep, go for it, Tim.
Great. Hi, Paul.
Hey, Tim.
Long time no talk.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, a quick question on procedural issues. Could you clarify a bit more your decision to keep this informal for such a long duration?
Well, as I noted earlier, this is something we've done to quite a lot of success in IRP, where we develop a lot of the work at the staff level, and then when it's ready for sort of formal consideration, the judge issues a ruling and sucks it up into the proceeding record, and then you can start talking about decisions and whatnot. So we're not quite at that point, and so what we're focusing on is trying to get as much done as possible and as not baked, but clear as to what the proposal is before going through a more formal route, because that just slows things down, because I think we're not quite ready yet for that. So that's the justification for doing it.
Okay, thanks.
We're trying to move quickly and be efficient, I think is the way to think about it.
Yeah, I hear you. I guess my only concern there, and obviously you've considered this, is having things on the record. You're going to lose quite a bit of on the record.
Well, our expectation, Tam, is that when we
record by making it formal.
Yeah, no, I think when we are updating the FIP proposal, it's going to get into a lot of the sort of rationale why we made changes and the clarifying the problem that we're trying to solve. It's going to have case studies attached to it to justify it. And I think at that point, it's probably appropriate for consideration in a proceeding. Otherwise, we can put it into a proceeding now, and it would just take a longer time. It would take longer to do that. And just given that to the time-sensitive topic, we just have to, take this informal route to keep things moving along. But I hear you, and I think we've used this quite a lot in the past in other proceedings, and it's always worked on very complex topics. And we haven't had any sort of due process or record development problems.
Okay, thank you.
Next question.
Hey, yes, this is Julian again with Cal Advocates. I'm interested in when and how you plan to determine the vehicles that will be covered by FIP. Interested specifically in like ports and forklifts, those kind of things. Thanks so much.
I would say right now we're going to focus on medium and long haul freight, depot, and long haul charging, and wait till we get the comments from the parties that just sort of help us prioritize our work and help us understand to what extent they're dependent on long lead infrastructure, and that a framework like this could actually help them. So I mean, we're going to be doing our research. We're going to be working with ARB and CEC, but a lot of our direction comes from comments that we get from parties. So, you know, if you have any guidance, you know, please, you know, put it in your comments on the 21st. Next question. I'll just remind people, if you already asked your question, if you could put your hand back down again, that'd be great.
Charlie, you should be able to unmute.
Charlie looks like he's still muted on our end. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
I can, Charlie.
Hey, thank you very much, and thanks for your comments about needing to move this along and following the informal process. I'm Charlie Alcock, and I am here today on this call representing the Daimler Trucks team as we look at this very important question. And I think my question is around the actual number of vehicles that are required to be deployed. Both CARB and CEC have included those forecasts, and for 2030. And let's pick a date for this conversation. And when you look at the number of zero emission vehicles that need to be out there by that time, and assuming most of those are going to be battery electric vehicles, you can kind of back your way out. And the AAPE proposal, oh sorry, the forecast by CEC has gigawatt hour estimates and how much charging loads it's likely to be. I think we're talking about a number that is probably, 800 to, over 1,000 megawatts worth of charging that are going to be needed probably in the Southern California region alone, which is a big number. And I'm just wondering how this process is going to address this rather significant amount of infrastructure that needs to be added very quickly when this stuff takes 10 years to build and we're 7 years out and we're nowhere close to having projects designed and then having to run through the GRC process for every utility. And then, that's an 18-month process. How does this timing math work?
Yeah. So you have articulated the problem statement for this proposal. So I don't disagree with anything you said. And having said that, I just want to note that the work that we're talking about hasn't really been done before, where there's sort of just a systematic consideration of how much infrastructure is needed in the outer years that we would start planning for today, even though the market is a little unclear how it's going to sort of be realized and what its relationship is with the infrastructure, like how it's going to use it, when it's going to use it, where it's going to use it. So I would say the immediate value for this proposal would be to just elevate what is before us. Because, I know, and I agree with you that you could, on the back of a napkin, just identify and agree that there will be a problem. And so the purpose of this proposal is just to go about that articulation in a more systematic manner that then allows us to prioritize, because there's a good chance, I'm not saying it's definite, but there is a reasonable chance that we'll probably have to prioritize the segments that we're going to electrify. So then what's the criteria for making that determination? And how does that align with the expectations in ARB's freight regs? And if there is a mismatch, this is the framework for elevating that to decision makers to resolve. Right now, that framework for elevating articulating the problem, elevating the problem, and and facilitating a conversation doesn't exist. So I think our immediate goal would be to just quickly work with utilities. You know, it probably would take at least 6 months. Once people agree we're going to go ahead with this, and translate the IEPR forecast, you know, out into, you know, even out to 2035 and beyond, what the infrastructure implications are from a cost, risk, and timing perspective. And if it's more than we can build and plan for, let's come up with a plan for figuring out how to move forward. There's no process for figuring out that plan right now, Charlie. So that's what this proposal is about. Did that answer your question, Charlie? He's on mute again, Emily.
Okay.
Sorry about you.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Thank you very much for that context. So once we go through that, we elevate the problem, we articulate the situation and start seeing green lights to proceed with charging zones. Do we then still go through each IOU, putting those plans into a GRC, and we wait for the timing of the GRCs? And you know, it's every 4 years, right? And I think, for example, SCE is going through theirs right now for test year 25. So it's going to take a while to work through the system. Is there kind of like a free card to go to jump early or go ahead and start that's outside of the GRC process of approving budget?
That would be a logical place to have a logical conversation to have, and we are having that conversation. Then the question is like, what is prudent for ratepayers? What allows us to provide enough sort of due diligence from a ratepayer perspective while not materially delaying the infrastructure deployment, and also giving us time to really consider the trade-offs between this segment being electrified versus another, versus what it does to, say, market transformation for the freight industry versus electric sector decarbonization, wildfire, undergrounding of lines. I mean, there's just a lot going on. So we just need to figure out. So the short answer is yes, but saying yes, we can't do that overnight. And we need to figure out how to answer these sort of trade-off questions that we're not really asking right now. So we're aware of the issue, aware that status quo cost recovery might need to be tweaked, and we're just thinking that through right now. And if you have any suggestions, you should put that in your comments.
Yeah, we will do that, and thank you. I don't want to take up any more of the valuable time this afternoon, but at least from most of the OEMs' perspectives, there is no trade-off because there is a regulatory compliance requirement.
I understand that. And then that gets to what is the feedback loop then if we're starting to see implications for the electric sector that are at odds with reliability or affordability, then we need to talk to ARB and other decision makers as to how do we resolve that.
Yeah, so I think that's the question. Yes, that's the question we're going to eventually get to, because putting this all on the backs of the ratepayer is a heavy lift.
Yes.
As we have traditionally done it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no, all good questions. Howard?
Yes.
Okay, go for it. We have 5 minutes left, so I want to let you know.
Basically, in response to a question by Mr. Buckwalter, you said, while we're waiting for comments about the off-road vehicles and whether they should be included, I can save some time here. They must be included. The study is fatally defective if it does not. I mean, every operation that has freight handling has cargo handling equipment. You know, at least they have forklifts, but they also have a lot of other equipment. And ports are fairly unique in that they have vessels as well.
Yeah. Hey,
So
Howard, I
it's
just want
really,
to Howard, I just want to clarify. I'm not saying that we're not until someone tells us otherwise. We're saying to the extent it needs long lead time infrastructure, someone needs to consider it, and that we're asking people in comments to tell us how to go about doing that. And it has to be, you know, from a practical, like next steps approach. And what we're trying to avoid is sort of a policy discussion, but more of concrete next steps. What should we do? Who should we talk to? And what meetings should we convene to better understand the inputs and assumptions we need? To what extent the market, regulatory, and operational sort of issues around the market segment you're talking about are different than freight, and we need to change our proposal to capture their needs. So this is where we're at right now, Howard, is just sort of make the case of why we need to do it from a long lead time infrastructure perspective, and then help us think through that work plan.
yeah. And look, the basic goal of your effort here is really highly commendable. I mean, I fully support what you're trying to do, but once again, it's you have to include these elements, otherwise the study will be meaningless and the infrastructure will be inadequate.
Yep. As I said, Howard, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you, but you know, to the extent you could help us in comments, that would be great.
I will.
As you can tell, I'm not an expert on you know, off-road vehicles.
Oh, okay. We'll do it.
Thank you. So Emily, I think we're at the end of our time. Any logistical things we want to share with stakeholders?
Yeah, I just have a few comments on next steps. So just a reminder, we've alluded to it several times on the call today, but we've extended the timeline for comments on the FIP proposal out to 60 days. So comments are due to us by 7/21/23, and you can submit them via email to Paula Grunling, Paul Douglas, and myself. And again, all this information will be posted to the website if anyone needs to access it. So yeah, thank you so much for joining today. And oh, seeing one question from Ellie.
Yeah, just really quickly, I wanted to ask how soon the recording is going to be posted from this so that I could incorporate some of your feedback and answers to questions into comments.
We'll work with IT to get it posted as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you so much.
Great. And on that note, everyone, thank you very much for your time and questions. Always appreciate it, and that's how we learn. And look forward to reading your comments on July 21st, and we'll keep the conversation going after that.